Hello and welcome to the MCQ lecture series. In today's class, I'll discuss some of the important MCQs with respect to macroeconomics, that to the later part of Keynesian theory, in which we'll look at some of the criticisms as well. So let's get started. The first question is, according to Keynes, the inducement to invest in a capitalist country declines due to fall in what? So inducement to invest in a capitalist sort of economic system declines because of A, rate of interest, or B, propensity to save, C, the size of income of a person, or D, the marginal efficiency of capital is falling. So here, according to the Keynes, inducement to invest in a capitalist economy falls or declines due to a fall in the marginal efficiency of capital. Therefore, option D is the correct answer here. Let us now move to the next question, which is talking about Keynesian theory of employment and the equilibrium level per se. So the Keynesian theory asserts that economy can be in equilibrium at dash full employment level, at A, more than full employment level, B, less than full employment level, C, equal to full employment level, or none of the above. So here in the Keynesian theory, the equilibrium is reached at a level which is less than full employment level of equilibrium. So therefore option B is the correct answer to this particular question. I hope the question is clear. Let us now move to the next, which talks about Keynesian money supply, or the concept of money supply according to the Keynesian approach per se. And the question is framed in this fashion: the Keynesian approach suggests that the money supply consists of dash and dash money. The money supply consists of dash and dash money. The first option is government's money and credit money. Second is bank money and people's money. Third is post office money and government's money. Last is none of the above. So here in the Keynesian approach, it is always the government's money and credit money which forms the major component of money supply per se, and therefore option A, government's money and credit money, is the correct answer to this particular question. I hope this is pretty much clear. In the next segment, I'll talk about what government money, or how do you denote government money, and how do you look at credit money per se. So next question is talking about M1, which is also called as government's money. So the question is framed in this fashion: according to Keynes, M1 consists of dash. So M1 consists of A, government's money, B, credit money, C, cash, or D, none of the above. So here M1 specifically consists of the government's money, and therefore option A is the correct answer to this particular question. Let us now move to the next question, which is talking about M2. So M2 in the Keynesian money supply consists of dash, and here M2 consists of A, government's money, B, credit money, C, cash, and D, none of the above. So we have seen government's money is accounted under M1. So therefore here the correct answer is B, credit money. Now credit money is the money which is generated by the private investors per se, and therefore credit money is the correct answer to question number 5. I hope the idea of money supply, it consists of government money and credit money. It is alternatively also called as M1 and M2. M1 means the government's money and M2 means the credit money. Let us now move to the next, which is talking about the criticism of Keynesian theory of employment according to one particular economist. So according to Paul Sweezy, Keynes failed to take into account the problems of dash. He failed to take into account the problems of A, involuntary unemployment, B, frictional or technological unemployment, then unemployment per se, and none of the above. So here if we look at it, according to Paul Sweezy, Keynes failed to take into account the frictional unemployment, and as a result option B is the correct answer to this particular question. Let us now move to the next criticism of the Keynesian theory according to Professor Hayek. Professor Hayek opined that to concentrate in dash only, saying that in the long run, by saying that in the long run we are all dead, is a serious intellectual error. Concentrating in what? Concentrating in A, long term, B, short term, C, short run, and D, long run. So according to Professor Hayek, Keynes opined that let us concentrate only on the short run, because in the long run we are all dead, and therefore Professor Hayek considers this as a serious intellectual error, and therefore option C, that is Professor Hayek opined that to concentrate in the short run only, and saying that in the long run we are dead is a serious intellectual error committed by John Maynard Keynes in his theory of employment per se. So option C is the correct answer to this particular question. Let us now move to the next question. According to the Keynesian approach, saving, particularly I am asking, according to the Keynesian approach, saving is a dash, is a virtue, is wise, is neutral, and none of the above. Particularly this means is good, is bad, neutral, and none of the above. So according to the Keynesian approach, saving is bad, so therefore, or is wise, so therefore option B is the correct answer. A similar sort of question according to the classical approach, let us look at it. According to the classical model, saving is a dash, whether it is a virtue or whether it is good, whether it is wise, that is bad, neutral, and none of the above. So according to Keynes it is bad, but according to the classical model, saving is good and therefore it is a virtue, and therefore option A is the correct answer. I hope both the distinctions are pretty much clear. This can be one of the points of distinction between the Keynesian approach and the classical approach with respect to saving as a parameter. So in Keynesian approach, saving is bad, in classical it is good. I hope both the questions are pretty much clear. Let us now move to the next question, which is talking about, according to the classical theory, interest is a reward for what? So here I am specifically looking at the classical theory, and the classical theory says or suggests that interest is a reward for, first is liquidity preference, the second option is time preference, C is money, and D none of the above. So here according to the classical model, interest is the reward paid for time preference, and therefore option B is the correct answer. According to the classical theory, I am looking at interest. Now from the similar prism we are going to look at what the Keynesian theory talks about in terms of interest. So according to Keynesian theory, interest is a reward for, interest according to the Keynes model is a reward for A, liquidity preference, B, time preference, C, money, and D, none of the above. But now we know that time preference is from the classical model and not for the Keynesian model, so eliminate this option altogether. None of the above cannot be. Money and liquidity preference, so according to Keynes it is liquidity preference which fetches you or which rewards you through rate of interest, and therefore option A, liquidity preference, is the correct answer. So again, a point of distinction between the Keynes model and the classical model. The classical suggests interest as a reward for time preference, and on the contrary the Keynesian theory suggests that interest is a reward for liquidity preference. So I hope both these questions are pretty much clear. Let us now move to the last question in this segment, which is talking about two statements which are given to us, and we have to identify which of them are true. So first let us look at the question. Which of the following statements are true with respect to the Keynesian and classical model? And these are the statements. The first statement is classical economists favored balanced budget, and the second statement is Keynes favored deficit budget. So we have to check the truth of these statements individually as well as collectively per se. So let us look at the first option. Both are true, that means A and B, that means Keynesian favored deficit and the classical favored balanced budget. Both are false, that means both the things are false. C is only A is correct and B is false, that means A is classical economics favored balanced budget is true, but Keynes favored deficit is false, and the last option is only B is true and A is false. So here if we look at the statements, both these statements are true, and therefore option A is the correct answer to this particular question, which suggests that classical economists favored balanced budget and on the other hand Keynes favored deficit budget. Again, a big point of difference between the Keynesian approach and the classical approach. So I hope these MCQs are pretty much clear. Please stay tuned for more. Thank you.